Welcome back, everybody, to Building the Empire. We're a commercial real estate focused podcast hosted by the Commercial Real Estate Group at Georgia State. My name is Payton Broaddus, and I'm the president of the Commercial Real Estate Group. I'll be your host today, and I'm here alongside my co-host, Sanusi.
Thank you, Payton. It's a pleasure to be here as the director of engagement for the Commercial Real Estate Group.
So we are very excited for today's episode. We have Mr. Scott Taylor from Carter & Associates. Scott, thanks for being here. Really appreciate it.
Great to be here.
So as Carter's president and CEO, Scott manages the day-to-day operations and leverages his relationships to source and create new business opportunities for Carter as an investor, developer, and advisor. So Scott is responsible for providing executive oversight to both the development and investment teams. Carter is one of the nation's top multidiscipline developers and is currently handling mixed-use, multifamily, student housing, corporate, institutional, and educational projects across the country. Scott is one of the principal owners of Carter. So over his 28-year career, Scott has been involved in the development and investment activities of more than 15 million square feet. Prior to joining Carter, Scott was president of Atlanta-based Holder Properties, and he began his real estate career as an industrial and land broker with Cushman & Wakefield of Georgia in 1989. Scott also played football at Rhodes College, and he graduated from the University of Georgia with a bachelor's degree in finance. So, Scott, why don't you kind of take us through the beginning? You know, where did you grow up, and how did that kind of affect who you've become today?
Thanks, Payton. And Ade, it's a pleasure to be with the two of you and your colleagues, and honored to be on the podcast. So I am from Atlanta, grew up here, went to high school at the Lovett School. And, it's interesting because I had several uncles that were in the commercial real estate business. And without a doubt, that sort of shaped me from a beginning. But early on, my parents were divorced, and, we didn't really have a lot of means. Now, we were not in poverty by any sense. But, my mother and sister and I, lived in rented houses sort of in West Midtown Bolton and then parts of Buckhead growing up. And so, we were on financial aid and scholarships and things like that at Lovett as well as at Rhodes. When I went to Rhodes on a financial aid package, I was doing work study and doing laundry and things like that just to continue to sort of allow me to be there. And so in terms of, my upbringing, not having a lot, when we were on spring break was, we just didn't go to school that week. We weren't going on ski trips or beach trips or things like that. And so it really did shape me in terms of wanting more and wanting to be a provider for my family. And then also just trying to be in a position to where I could ultimately make a difference, because we were scratching and clawing all the way through college. And when I went to Georgia, I worked there for a law firm as a runner. I was cutting partners yards and babysitting for their kids and things like that. And I wouldn't change any of that, because it sort of put a fire in me to be in a position to where I could sort of hopefully do, anything that I put my mind and heart and soul into, because I saw one side that I didn't necessarily like, but it without a doubt helped shape the person that I'm still trying to become, to this day.
Gotcha. So, I mean, you kind of have this motivation. You saw your uncles, a little bit in commercial real estate, but when did you kind of see, the path? When did the path become clear? When did you see, like, I definitely want to be in commercial real estate? This is the way that I'm going to try to build wealth for my family.
Definitely. When I was at Rhodes College and was fortunate enough to be on the football team there in 1985, thought I wanted to continue playing football, thought I wanted to continue a liberal arts sort of path. It was there when I realized I was really ready for a change, that I thought that I wanted to work in Atlanta, Georgia, thought that I wanted to be in business, and thought that in order for me to probably launch most effectively, I needed to be back and begin building those relationships and trying to figure things out. Probably at Georgia was when I realized that real estate would be my hopeful calling. One of my roommates, my junior year, was Sam Holmes, who's one of the most prolific office brokers, along with his partner John Schlesinger, and Sam was going to Cushman and Wakefield. I had an uncle that had been at Cushman and Wakefield, and so thought that Atlanta being just a fantastic growth engine at the time, so many young people moving there, that if I could get into the real estate business, commercial real estate brokerage would be a great place to be. And so without a doubt, it was definitely the last several years at Georgia was when that became clear that I wanted to be in the real estate industry.
Mm. So what position did you play in football?
Play quarterback.
Oh, wow. Okay. Did you think about like trying out for the team at UGA, or was that kind of behind you at that point?
Heck no, there's no way I could. I was a just average, football player, but no way. It was football days were over, and it was fun just to sort of be a part of the University of Georgia community. And so no, that was never a possibility. But thank you for asking that.
Well, I mean, safe to say it seems like it worked out for the best. So that's good. So starting your career as a broker, I know that's a popular kind of place for really successful people to go and start their career. So how do you think that base you got at Cushman and Wakefield for the first couple of years prepared you for the rest of your career as a broker?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, my premise was hopefully getting into the land business and industrial just would give me a great foundation of learning how to cold call, learning, at the time there were no cell phones were just coming around. There was obviously no internet. So there was a lot of just, pounding the pavement, literally going and cold calling buildings, as well as like with land, we'd have to go down to the courthouse and find parcel plats, who would own this piece of land, and what's it zoned, and things like that. All of that was incredibly helpful, but probably the most meaningful takeaway I had from my commercial real estate experience at Cushman & Wakefield was getting fired, because I was at the last, after my 2 or so years of being there, I realized that I was ready to go do something else. And so I was beginning to talk to John Holder at Holder Properties about potentially joining him. But it took a long time for that to happen. And so one day, Mike Elting, the branch manager at Cushman Wakefield, came in and said, "Hey, I've got to let you go." And I'm like, "What?" And granted, I was on a $16,000 a year draw. We'd made a couple of deals along the way, but I mean, I wasn't making any money. I mean, I was borrowing money from them to work there. And he said, "Hey man, we've got to make some cuts. We're in a recession and I got to let you go. I thought you were going to do a deal with somebody else." I said, "I'm not, man. I mean, I need a job, and he goes, "Sorry, you're out." And so I left there owing them $19,000, was recently engaged to be married later that year, and didn't have a job. And so if I think about, my takeaway from that, it was, man, you got to make something happen. You got to be gritty, be resilient, and be persistent. And so I was trying to find a way respectfully and politely to try to get John to, give me an offer, because I thought I wanted to be a developer. I thought that's the trajectory I wanted to be on. But man, I was sitting there in a tough spot because I didn't have a job, owed them money, and was getting ready to be married there in a few months. And so fortunately, things did work out with John Holder, and that was a fantastic opportunity to work under his tutelage for 13 years. But when I think about my days as a broker, probably my most material takeaway was getting fired and how you respond, when things don't go your way.
So that makes me think of something else. So I was talking with a buddy the other day, and he was telling me a story about this guy Cortez in the 1500s, who they were like trying to conquer different parts of the world back then. I think he was Spanish, and they went over to try to conquer the Aztecs, and they burned the ships when they got there. So it was like, they either won or they didn't, and their backs were up against the wall. That kind of reminds me of that, in a sense. Like, you really had no choice but to win, right?
That's right. And you guys will see this throughout your real estate career. And that's a great analogy that we at Carter have used from time to time. You hopefully don't have to use it too often, but we'll say, all right, we're burning the ships on this one. We're all in. And so you will remember that, and it will come back, and hopefully it will bode well for you. But absolutely, that happens in our industry, and you got to find a way to hunker down and make it happen.
So you're at Holder. Briefly, describe what were you doing when you first got there, and then eventually made your way up to president. So how did that kind of unfold?
Yeah, so John Holder had recently taken over for Holder Properties, and Holder Properties was founded in 1980. The construction business, Holder Construction Company, founded in 1960 by Robert Holder, a complete icon in construction and development, as is John. And then Tommy Holder's just an incredible leading Holder Construction Company. I kind of went in to learn the business, and I started doing landlord leasing. I did site acquisition, did property management, and it was a wonderful learning opportunity to be at a relatively small organization, but be able to do a lot of different things. Did project management, then ultimately did development, project financing, to where, yes, I was incredibly fortunate enough to be the president of the organization when I left after being there for 13 years. But just learned a tremendous amount, and had a lot of fun with John and a number of the other colleagues there at Holder Properties, just doing a lot of different things. Because in the development business, you really have to know enough about every component of the of the business to be able to anticipate. Because what developers are, for the most part, are sort of conductors of the symphony, and there's so many different subject matter experts that we have the good fortune of working with, but you're trying to leverage all of those various team members and then anticipate what may or may not happen along the way. And so my time at Holder was a tremendous opportunity to have that experience.
You talked about being a conductor, and I really like that that analogy. And when you talk about conducting development, specifically in the commercial real estate landscape, what do you think was the biggest learning curve for you as to, okay, this is actually what it takes to take me from 0 to 100? Because in many senses, that's what development is. You have an idea, the vision isn't clear, but then it's up to you to sort of carve out the iceberg. So what was that? What was the most difficult piece of, that learning curve for you?
Well, probably, again, just seeing others do it and being very aware of questions that people are asking, seeing what happens in a down market, where no matter how good of a project you may have and how great of a vision, if interest rates are at a certain point, and costs are at a certain point, like they are now, equity is on the sidelines. There is no debt. Banks are moving in a very cautious manner. You tend to see the herd mentality of lenders and institutional investors. And so, having seen that in several different cycles, it just really allows you to be better positioned for the next one in terms of anticipating when the music stops, because you can't create a market that doesn't exist. And so just by being around a few and seeing them and seeing people that I was learning from and how they were responding to that, just helped really probably form my outlook and perspective that I have today, along with my colleagues, in terms of what you can and can't do when you're in very slow times like we're unfortunately in right now.
I think that's a good point. I don't think there's any single developer or real estate investor that hasn't experienced pain in this industry. And I think there's a magnitude to the pain because of how far you project in real estate and how much you rely upon the plan going accordingly. And on that note, where is Carter at as far as their outlook and the way you're trying to position yourself going into, the rest of this quarter, but also, the upcoming years following this downturn?
So right now, we have just under $600 million worth of, as we like to call, more affordable multifamily apartments under development around the Southeast. And we kind of during COVID wrote a business plan thinking that there's still a tremendous shortage of housing for the majority of Americans who can only afford to pay 30% of their annual income in housing, and the high majority are paying more than that. So we tried to really craft a product and a thesis that would provide nice, new, more affordable housing for this demographic. And so we have 7 of those under construction right now, and then a mixed-use project in Lakeland, Florida, under construction, and had hoped this year that we would have started 5 to 6 of those for projects that we had either entitled or close to being entitled and under contract. Well, we started 1, and we don't probably see ourselves starting another one of those garden style market, surface park walk-up apartment developments. I mean, if we get super lucky, maybe late this year, but odds are it'll be sometime first 2 quarters of next year. And so we also, in our business strategy is to also execute on several mixed-use projects, which we have, and then opportunistic, relationship-driven, either acquisition or developments. And so those are the 3 areas of our strategic focus, along with this garden style program. But right now, what we're trying to do is either extend contracts that we have on our story program, which is the garden style. If we can't get additional time, we're basically dropping those contracts. And then we're spending time, or our pre-development dollars, our precious pre-development dollars, on projects that we really feel as though have a high probability of closing within the next 12 or so months, with the hope being that the capital markets begin to thaw somewhat between now and, let's just say, next summer. And that may or may not be the case. But that's really where we're spending our time and our focus, right now as a business.
I appreciate that insight, and you throw out a key term that for our viewers and listeners, I think is important to look at. And you throw out the term affordable, and it's a simple term, but it also has multiple connotations, I think, in real estate. So if you could just take us through what your definition of affordability is, and sort of what you've seen how it's used in real estate circles right now across the country.
Yeah, and I mean, affordability is without a doubt a challenge throughout our country, and there are different levels of affordability. What we are targeting here is we are not using any sort of tax incentives. We're not using low income housing credits or anything along those where you have to get those through state or housing authority allocations. We're basically just trying to go and be as cost effective and efficient in building this product. And it basically hits an 80% average median income, AMI. And so most of the real need of affordability in our country is below 80%. It's really 60% or below. And where you see, organizations, like Integral and Columbia here locally, who have been incredibly successful, the Russell organization doing that. We are not in that space per se. We're looking at it because we believe that the demand for that product is not going away, but it takes time to put yourself in a position to receive some of those tax credits and things like that. But what we're basically trying to do is just be in areas where there are heavy employment centers, the demographic, is there that is paying more than they should, and most of the existing housing stock is either functionally obsolete, or given the choice, this renter would much rather be in a newer, nicer product that is cost effective and affordable versus an older product that is still more expensive than it should be, but is just not as desirable.
So you guys have this the story apartment, that's what they're called, right?
Correct.
So that's kind of one aspect of what you guys are doing, and then another aspect is kind of redeveloping whole communities, like you're doing with Summerhill. So as Georgia State students, we love the Summerhill development. It's great, over there by the stadium, and Georgia State's kind of shifting a lot of their stuff over on the other side of the highway where Summerhill is. So just curious, how did that opportunity present itself? What role did you play in securing that opportunity? And yeah, just talk us through that.
Sure. So we'll never forget it. It was November 11th of 2013 when the Atlanta Braves announced that they were leaving Turner Field, leaving the city of Atlanta. It really caught everyone off guard. It was an earth-shattering announcement. But in our business, you always try to see where is there a silver lining. And when you think of 68 acres in a 1.5 million square foot building, with that proximity to downtown Atlanta, to the world's busiest airport, we looked at it as, okay, what could be done here? And without a doubt, one of the first ideas that we all had was Georgia State. We knew that Georgia State needed a place to play football. Ultimately, the team had been playing in the Georgia Dome. The Georgia Dome was coming down. What would become Mercedes-Benz was in the works, and so I knew President Mark Becker, but we were not close, but we're close enough. And so I called him within several weeks of that announcement, because we immediately went to work and started crafting sort of a vision for what we could potentially see on that site. And when I called President Becker, I mean, he was very kind, but he said, "Thanks, Scott, appreciate the call. You aren't the first one to call us, but let's stay in touch and sort of see how things unfold." And so we continued, because at the time we had been doing a significant amount of work as a project manager on college and university campuses, building for fee, not investing equity or taking any risk. And we had built probably 12,000 dorm rooms on campus. We built additions to football stadiums, baseball parks, infrastructure. So we understood what it takes to build on a university or college campus. And it's demanding and it's different, and it takes time. But we had also been working in Cincinnati, Ohio, and we also executed a plan in the early 2000s called the Metro Plan for Bell South, which is now AT&T, doing private mixed-use projects, some of which were P3, public-private, involving multiple stakeholders, municipalities. 2007, we started working in Cincinnati, Ohio, on a project called the Banks, where we controlled 18 acres in between Great American Ballpark, where the Cincinnati Reds play, and what was then Paul Brown Stadium, where the Bengals played. And we did about $650 million worth of vertical improvements over parking that we built for the county and the city. And so at this point in time, in 2013, rolling into 2014, we believed that locally, at least, we had the track record and experience of working near, on college campuses, and the private, horizontal and vertically integrated development to come in and look at this incredibly located piece of property and try to secure Georgia State University as a partner. And so ultimately, in the spring of 2014, we were able to sign an exclusive agreement with the Georgia State University Foundation, to where we said, okay, we're going to be partners. We don't know what that means. We're going to align and we're going to chase this thing together. And either we get it together or we don't, because ultimately, sort of the vision that we had for the property in terms of commercial and retail and for sale housing, student housing, and adjacent to athletic uses was very similar to what President Becker and his team's vision was. And that vision would continue to evolve over time. But it was spring of 2014 where we were ultimately able to say, all right, hey, we're going to chase this thing together. We don't know how it's going to go, but we're going to be partners, until the end. And that's what ultimately ended up happening, and where we were fortunate enough to win the competitive public bid. And we closed on the property in January of 2017. And since that time, either on property or around immediately adjacent to us, about $850 million has been invested, in that area. And we still have a lot of work to do, but it's been really rewarding to see how all the pieces and parts, continue to fall in place. And we've made a ton of mistakes along the way, but we're all incredibly passionate about it at Carter, and we're gonna keep our head down and keep going.
So you've got like the Georgia State piece, kind of the public piece, and then I know Summerhill is like a very historic neighborhood. It's got deep roots. So I'm sure there were some people that did not want any part of this new development. So we see it a lot where new projects will come into a previously blighted area and gentrify the area and kind of price out the residents that have been living there for however long. So I'm sure that's like a super hard challenge that you guys face, kind of balancing the two. So how have you tried to make everybody happy in that sense?
So Summerhill, and we learned all of this. Summerhill is the oldest settlement in the city of Atlanta, in 1865, formed by freed slaves and Jewish immigrants. Tremendous history, Payton, as you mentioned. And we were not well received at all. The neighborhood had been challenged with when the interstate had been built. The neighborhood was divided. Housing was destroyed basically when Atlanta Fulton County Stadium was built in 1965. Then when the Olympic Stadium was built, more displacement occurred. And so the neighborhood always felt as though it really had not had, a voice. And we went in with the sole sort of objective to listen and build trust. And we did that by showing up and just being respectful and trying to really understand the wants and aspirations, of the community. And so that we knew that this was not going to work if the community was not a true partner in what we were doing. And so building trust and listening was without a doubt, our focus.
Even though commercial real estate is in the private investments landscape, you threw out a term earlier. I think all real estate, especially large commercial real estate, is a public-private partnership, even if it's coming from private sources of capital. And if you could just sort of talk to us about going forward in the future with there being serious needs for multifamily housing, as you articulated earlier, what on the public side can be done to help support private investors to create positive externalities for communities? And then what do you think, sort of private development, private investment firms can do in order to make sure that they're keeping in mind all the community stakeholders, not just specifically the target demographic for development?
So, there's so many interesting, when you think of affordability, you think of mixes of use, you think of the impact on the infrastructure that anything that we all do, impact to schools. A number of times we go into a municipality where we have to go get a multifamily project rezoned. The first concerns are, what's this going to do to our school system? What's this going to do to our road network? And so to the extent that there is comprehensive planning, by municipalities, to where, you can come out in a win-win situation, because what works for all communities want the same thing.
Yeah.
We want to have safe streets. We want to have well lit. We want to have nice amenities. And this doesn't matter your socioeconomic status. This doesn't matter if you're white, you're black, you're gay, you're straight. We all want the same things. And so just having a sense of a purpose of how we all go about this is in a shared purpose in wanting this to get to the same place eventually. And so that's why, again, our vision as a company is to make a difference in the world by transforming communities and spaces so people can thrive. And in order for that to happen, you have to make sure that the next door neighbor you're not building something that's just going to completely destroy their quality of life. And you're trying to make sure that the director of planning, you're working with that office and in terms of making sure that you're within the context of a comprehensive plan, or a livable centers initiative, and with your elected officials, that you understand their aspirations and where they're going. Ultimately, though, you have to balance aspirations with market realities. And that's why being honest and direct around, hey, this is what we're trying to do from a financial standpoint. And this is, what we are able to do or can't do relative to maybe, some certain building standards or things. But you just got to be honest. You've got to constantly communicate. And again, back to that conductor scenario, you're just dealing with a lot of very different parties. And you just hopefully have to just make sure everybody knows sort of where you're going, and you try to get there in as efficient manner as possible.
Now, when you arrived in Atlanta, it was vastly growing. We're sitting here right now, it's vastly growing. What do you think needs to be done as it relates to the future of Atlanta, and how it can grow gracefully and really effectively, that it can still serve the current community stakeholders, but also new people that will be migrating into the city?
Sure. And again, it's that's hopefully why the two of you are going to get into the business, is that you think of Atlanta as just a wonderful place to live, to work, to raise a family. Quality of life is high. Cost of living, relatively speaking, is moderate. We've got the busiest airport in the world. We've got a great corporate community, and so we have a diversified service-based economy. Which is going to mean we're going to continue to attract a lot of highly educated young people here that will require more housing, more amenities, more retail, more recreational, aspects to this community. And so what does that mean? Trying to, we always want to go to where the puck's going to be, in terms of, trying to figure out what the market wants before it knows it wants it. And you think about what Jamestown did at Ponce City Market, huge project. They knew that if they did it right and they created the right tenancy, that would be an incredible destination, which it has. And so what's going to continue to happen on the Beltline will probably be an exciting area to watch. If you look at what's happening just 1 mile south of Summerhill on the Beltline, tremendous development activity. And so working with, again, you've got an overlay that you've got to take all your projects through on the Beltline. You've got to deal with the city. You've got to deal with your elected officials, and so it's just going to be a constant evolution of managing all of the various stakeholders to ultimately get to a place to where you're investing in a piece of real estate or a vertical real estate development that can get approved, is what the market is looking for. And that's where, and hopefully you're going to make, your risk adjusted return for making it all happen, because the developer is the one who is, keeps all those parties on the same page, and hopefully at some point, makes good profit for doing that.
So we're almost at time now, so we're gonna start to wrap this up, Scott. But we'd like to ask you one last question. So, as most of our listeners are college students and those who are looking to have careers in commercial real estate, what are three pieces of advice that you could offer, students like us who are looking to have a long, successful career in commercial real estate, similar to the one that you've been able to build?
First, without a doubt, focus on relationships and building your relationships now. When you think of commercial real estate, people may think we're in the real estate business. We're really in the relationship business, and that will come back in so many different points in your career. And so having those strong relationships and having as many of them as you can, super important. Secondly, would say really try to focus on your strengths, and what is it that you do well. Like I was a finance major at Georgia. I stink at numbers. I mean, I stink at numbers, but I've got a partner who can do, cash flows in his head. And so for so long, I tried to get better at, running cash flows and all this, that, and the other. And it doesn't come natural to me. And so, figure out what you do well and get better at that. And so really, really leverage, your strengths. And then maybe the third thing would be really understand trust. Trust is really a foundation of everything that we do at Carter. In fact, our culture is one based on trust and candor, with the thought being that if you really trust your team, you trust your partner, you can make better decisions, faster decisions that will lead to better outcomes. And so we at Carter say why we believe in trust and candor is if you really care about your colleague, you care about their career, their family, you trust them, you trust that they're feeling the same way about you, then you can be candid. We can have very direct conversations that are hopefully in the best interest of our client, of our project, and of all of us collectively. And some people think, yeah, I trust you, this, that, and the other. Well, I mean, you really have to understand how important trust is to, everything we do in business and in life, and so I would focus on, relationships, your strengths, and really kind of heading in a direction of building a foundation of everything you do on trust.
Awesome. Those were some gems. So hope everybody who's listening wrote that down. But seriously, Scott, thank you again for coming to speak with us today. We really appreciate the insights you're able to share. We talked about resilience, burning the ships, learning from others, sculpting communities, and trying to see the silver lining. So we covered a lot in a short amount of time. We hope that you really keep crushing it with Carter. We're sure that you will. We look forward to seeing the direction that you guys kind of go in. So thank you to everybody who tuned into this episode, and we will see you in the next one.